My name is James Newell Louder, and I was born in 1843 in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania. Now, I recognize that when I was young, that was the best opportunity to really crack into any hobby that I had an interest in. First, I was a stonemason, where I learned about hard work and manual labor. Then I worked for Neptune Horse and Engine Company, where I learned the in and outs of retail. And third, I worked for the post office, which was my personal favorite. Not only was it rather fun sorting mail, but also I had access to all sorts of periodicals and newspapers, which I found fascinating. I loved the idea of witnessing something, writing it down, shaping the information, and sending it off. But before I could really get into journalism, I was drafted into the Civil War. So I joined the Union Army and I headed down to Kansas, where I immediately came down with typhoid fever, leaving me almost completely deaf, which was ironic since my last name is Louder. So it ended my military usefulness, and I continued to read the newspaper during my convalescence, because what else are you going to do when you're lying down for what feels like forever? So when the Civil War ended and I had recovered, I turned to my 32 friends in the Army and I said, hey, let's not go back to our humdrum lives in the East. Let's go out west to the most exciting town that I have been reading about with the most exciting name, Idaho City, Idaho. Now, it was more exciting than you may think. The newspaper said that you could walk the land and literally pick up the gold as you walked along. And they were only slightly exaggerating. We made a ton of money at that place. Idaho City, Idaho, we were making the equivalent of $2,000 a week there, which was an extraordinary amount. But it wasn't all wonderful, since the shops there had very limited resources, so they had to jack up the prices in order to make a profit, and then they could jack the prices even more than that, and they did, because what were we going to do about it? So I was paying $400 for a bag of flour, $300 for a can of coffee, $600 for the equivalent of tea. So I was able to make some money. I was a bachelor after all. How much flour does a man need to survive? But it was not my favorite place after I had gotten there. But I stayed there for 4 years, and then I taught myself to be a mineral surveyor and moved to Texas. And I really don't remember a lot about being a mineral surveyor in Texas, because I met a beautiful woman and we fell in love, got married, and had 2 wonderful children. But I continued to read the newspaper. And the newspapers at that time were talking about this wonderful place called Silver Reef, where they found silver and sandstone that had never been seen before. And that was too interesting and too exciting for me not to want to be part of it. So I packed up my family and we headed up here to Silver Reef, where I immediately bought the dance hall. And I turned it into a grocery store, J.N. Louder and Company, which sounded wonderful. And it was very successful. And because I had been taken advantage of in Idaho City, I did not want to do the same here. And so I served decent products at a good price. And turns out you can make a good profit that way. But even more exciting to me than running a successful business was I got to be editor of the newspaper and really indulge my lifelong interest in journalism. And even more exciting than that is my friend Ed Pike, who owned the newspaper, later sold it to me a year later, and I owned my own newspaper. It was a dream come true. And my newspaper was very pro-miner and anti-management, just like myself. During that time, I also became postmaster, and we moved the post office into my grocery store, which was very convenient. And most prestigiously, I was also elected county commissioner, which essentially made me a judge. Now, people started to leave quite quickly. Silver Reef only lasted 16 years, if you want to be very generous about it. And people started to leave as the price of silver started to drop. I stayed longer than most people, but by 1889, it was time for me to go. The trouble was that I didn't have the financial capital that I needed in order to move me, my wife, my lifestyle, really anywhere else. So I talked to my friend Jack Ferris, and we opened up some mines over here in Harrisburg for silver, and they were not quite as profitable as they were here in Silver Reef, but they did the job, and I was able to get the financing I needed to move myself and my family to Eureka, Utah, which was a fabulous mining town. It's on the other side of Utah Lake from Provo. And we got there, and of course I set up a newspaper, because that's what I did. And the newspaper was so successful, and why shouldn't it be? I was running it. But it was almost too successful, because I soon started to eat up all the little newspapers around me. I ate up Mercury at Mercer, I ate up Tin Tank Publishing, I ate up the Silver Star, and I spent all my time building this publishing empire. But I would say, to my great regret, that me building this empire really took a toll on my marriage. And because of my time as a county commissioner, where I oversaw lots of divorce cases, I understood the struggle that unhappy marriages can cause. So I happily granted my wife a divorce. She went to California and married a very wealthy man and lived happily ever after. I moved to Salt Lake and met a woman named Ida, and between my publishing empire and her daughter's semi-successful acting career, we lived very happily until my death in 1920.